Hello everyone, it's Shannon here from Waffle Flower Crafts. In this video, I'm going to share with you all my tips and tricks for getting great alignment with the images in the Floatie Boys Stamp Set. This is the Floatie Boys Stamp Set, which is illustrated by Camo. This is a layering stamp set, and that means it takes multiple stamps to complete an image. Each one of these Floatie Boys actually has 3 stamps to complete the image. Your stamps typically come attached to the printed acetate. I have removed the stamps from that acetate and just placed them on the clear acetate, the back piece of acetate. Then I cut around each grouping of stamps that create a single image. I'm going to use this little piece of acetate to help me position my stamps later on my cardstock. And I've done this for each grouping of stamps. And the stamps groupings are really clearly illustrated on the acetate. There's a black circle that groups or circles around the 3 stamps that are needed to create that image. And again, there are 3 Floatie Boys, Floatie Boy A, B, and C. And then of course you also get 2 sentiments with this set as well. On the back piece of acetate, I did take a permanent marker and also kind of loop around the groupings of stamps. That's just to keep it organized because I did take all the stamps off of the printed acetate, which is what usually helps you keep your stamps organized. So I'm going to use my Misty today to help me stamp these Floatie Boys. I definitely recommend a stamp positioning tool like the Misty, something with a hinge for when you're stamping layering stamp sets. It just makes it a lot easier. So I have the first layer in the A Floatie Boy mounted in my Misty here, and I'm just going to ink it up in a Distress Oxide. This is Spiced Marmalade, and then I'll just stamp it down onto an A2 panel of white cardstock. This first layer is very easy. You just position where you want it to go and then ink it up and stamp it. I am going to stamp it one more time though, just to add a little extra detail to this image. I'm doing some partial inking at the bottom of the inner tube with a darker color. This is Ripe Persimmon. If I get a little too much, I'll use my finger to kind of remove it. And this will just create a little shadow and add a little depth or a little roundness to that inner tube. I'm now ready to position the second layer or second stamp for this Floatie Boy A image. So I have the printed acetate sheet here, and I'm now positioning it over where I previously stamped, so over the first layer. And key points I found for this image are his arms and his legs. You can see that back leg lines up to the swim trunks, and the same is true for his other leg, and then his arms kind of fill in, reach over to meet his hands. So those are kind of the key points that I found for this image that helped me align this to the previously stamped image. I'm also using my magnets to hold the acetate down and keep it in the right spot once I finally get it positioned, once I finally get that image positioned. And then once it's positioned, I will grab the actual stamp and now align the stamp to the printed image that is on the acetate. Once the stamp is in the right position, then I fold my Misty over, give it a press, and then it will pick up the stamp. Now my stamp is ready to ink up and then stamp. I just inked it up in a nice black, this is VersaFine Onyx Black, and stamped the second layer. With the second layer done, I'm now ready to move on to my third layer. So I have my acetate sheet again here. This is the third layer is indicated by A3. As you can see though, my acetate layer is hanging off the edge of my Misty, and I want my acetate always to be nice and flat for when I'm positioning. So I had to rotate my panel around here just to make sure that that acetate is flat. Now I'm positioning the third layer. This layer has little nubs for his elbows. That's what helped me to kind of position this layer as well. I just made sure those little nubs were right over his elbows. And now that the acetate's in the right place, I would just grab my stamp and align my stamp to the acetate. Then I fold my Misty over to pick up the stamp, and then I'm ready to ink up this third layer. I'll ink up this last layer with tumbled glass and then stamp it, and this will just add some nice highlights to this Floatie Boy. Now you can see the completed image and really see how gestural Camo style is. That's what I think makes these images so unique and special. Now we're going to move on to Floatie Boy C. I'm going to grab the first layer in Floatie Boy C and just position it here in the lower left corner of my panel. And again, the first layer in these Floatie Boys is really easy. You just place it wherever you want your image to be. No need for the acetate for the first layer. I'm again doing the partial inking to this image. I've stamped it first in spiced marmalade, and now I'm partially inking it up with ripe persimmon, and then I will stamp it, and this will add a nice little shadow, little gradation, and again makes that image kind of have some depth or some roundness. Now I'm taking the second layer in Floatie Boy C and I'm positioning it. As you can see here, this one's a little bit easier to position. You can kind of see the swim shorts that go to the legs that we stamped earlier, and then of course his face. You can see the lines and the chin and the nose of his face. Once I get this layer positioned, I'll grab the stamp for this layer, position it over the printed acetate, and then pick it up with my MISTI once it's in the right spot. And again, for the second layer, I'm going to use a VersaFine Onyx Black, which is a nice black. I think the black for the second layer really helps to define the images and really make them pop. Now again, I have a problem with my acetate. It's kind of hanging off the edge, so I needed to rotate my panel around here. Always make sure your panel is nestled in the corner of your MISTI. That's really important that you do that in case your panel shifts at all when you're stamping. If it's always in the corner, you can always realign it and not have to worry about your images getting off. So now I am positioning my third and final layer here, and this layer, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but his nipples, that's how I positioned this layer. So you just kind of align his nipples on his chest to the previously stamped pair, and then once I got that acetate aligned, I just grabbed the stamp and then aligned the stamp to the acetate, and then picked up my MISTI, and I used tumble glass again for this third final layer. Okay, so now we're ready to do the third and final Floatie Boy. This is Floatie Boy B. So I have the first layer there, just placing it where I want him to go. I'm going to ink this up in a different color. I'm using Cracked Pistachio Distress Oxide, and then I'm going to use Peacock Feathers. I'm going to use this for partial inking, so I'm just going to ink up the lower portion of this inner tube, and I'm using my finger quite heavily here to really kind of soften where the two colors meet, where the Cracked Pistachio and Peacock Feathers meet, so it has a smoother gradation, a smoother transition from one color to the next. Now that I'm done with that first layer, I'm going to grab my acetate sheet here and position the image for the second layer. For here, the key points I think are his legs and his arms. You can kind of see how the legs meet up with the edge of the inner tube, and the arms with the edge of the inner tube as well. And once I get the image lined up, I will then line the stamp up to the image and then fold a MISTI over, pick it up. Again, I'm using black ink, VersaFine Onyx Black, for this second layer. Now that this is stamped, I'm going to position the third layer. For this layer, I found that his elbow highlights as well as his cheek highlights helpful for positioning. Once I have that layer in the right position, I'll grab a stamp, align the stamp to the printed acetate layer, and then pick it up with my MISTI, and I'm going to ink this up again with tumbled glass. And that completes my last Floatie Boy. To finish up my stamping on this card, I'm going to stamp a sentiment. This again is from the Floatie Boy Stamp Set. It says "Enjoy the Day," and I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black, just stamping it sort of in the lower right corner of the panel. And that will complete my stamping. I went ahead and trimmed my panel down 1/8 of an inch on all the sides, and then adhered the panel to an A2 card base. And now I'm going to add a little detail, a little extra step. You could totally leave the card just as it is and just have the very simple, beautiful, clean and simple design of Camo's images. But I'm going to add just a little bit of water, at least a little suggestion of water, by smooshing some tumbled glass distress ink onto a piece of plastic or a piece of acetate, and then mixing it with a tiny amount of water, and then just painting a little bit of blue around in the background just to give the suggestion of water. The key thing here is just to use a very little water, because again, this is just white cardstock. It's not watercolor paper, so you just want to use a very little water, and that will complete my card. I hope you found these positioning tips and tricks helpful with this Floatie Boy Stamp Set. For any more info on the products I use, please visit Waffle Flower, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.